Most people don't fail because they lack talent. They don't fail because they lack intelligence. And they definitely don't fail because they lack desire. They fail because what drives them runs out faster than they ever expected. Think about it. You felt that surge of energy before. You set a goal. You feel unstoppable. You tell yourself, this time is different. And for a moment, it is. But then life shows up. The excitement fades. The routine feels heavy. And suddenly, the fire that once felt unstoppable is gone. Most people believe motivation is something that mysteriously disappears, as if it slips away overnight without warning. One day, they feel unstoppable, energized, committed, and the next day they feel drained, distracted, and disconnected from the very goals they were excited about. But the truth is far more confronting and far more empowering. Motivation doesn't disappear. You unknowingly turn it off, and you turn it off through the way you think, the standards you accept, and the meaning you attach to your experiences. Every human being is constantly driven by internal signals. Your brain is always asking two questions: what will bring me pleasure and what will help me avoid pain? When you first set a goal, the pleasure is vivid. You imagine success, freedom, confidence, recognition. Your nervous system lights up, your energy spikes, and action feels almost effortless. But as soon as progress slows or discomfort appears, the story in your mind begins to change. The goal that once felt exciting now feels heavy. The effort feels uncertain. And without realizing it, you start associating pain with the very thing you said you wanted. This is where motivation shuts down. Not because the goal isn't important, but because your brain no longer sees it as rewarding in the short term. You start focusing on what's hard instead of what's possible. You magnify obstacles and minimize reasons. You shift your attention from why you started to why it's inconvenient. That shift alone is enough to drain your energy. Where focus goes, energy flows, and most people unknowingly redirect their focus toward doubt, delay, and distraction. Another way motivation gets turned off is through lowering personal standards. When you tell yourself, I'll do it tomorrow, or it's okay to skip this once, you're training your nervous system to associate comfort with quitting. The brain learns fast. Each time you break a promise to yourself, it weakens the emotional connection to your goal. Over time, motivation doesn't vanish. It loses credibility. You stop trusting your own drive, and without trust, commitment collapses. People also turn off motivation by waiting for the right mood. They believe motivation should come first and action should follow. But peak performers know the opposite is true. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates emotion. Emotion reinforces motivation. When you wait to feel inspired, you hand control of your life to circumstances. When circumstances change, motivation fades again. The most dangerous part is that this process feels normal. It feels logical. It feels justified. But beneath it all, motivation hasn't left you. It's still there, waiting for direction, waiting for meaning, waiting for a reason that's stronger than comfort and stronger than fear. The moment you change what you associate pain and pleasure with, the moment you raise your standards and reconnect to a compelling reason, motivation doesn't need to be chased. It responds instantly to clarity, commitment, and emotional certainty. Most people believe motivation is a matter of discipline, willpower, or forcing yourself to push through resistance, but the real driver of consistent action is something far more powerful and far more subtle: your emotional state. Your emotional state is the lens through which you experience everything. It determines what you notice, what you ignore, and how much energy you have available in any given moment. When your state is strong, focused, and empowered, even difficult tasks feel manageable. When your state is weak, overwhelmed, or uncertain, even simple actions feel exhausting. This is why willpower alone never lasts, because it tries to override your state instead of changing it. Your emotions are not random. They are shaped by your physiology, your focus, and the meaning you assign to events. The way you breathe, the way you hold your body, the words you use in your mind, and the images you replay all work together to create a specific internal state. Most people wake up and immediately surrender their state to their phone, their worries, or their past failures. Before the day even begins, their energy is already drained. From that state, consistency becomes nearly impossible, no matter how badly they want to succeed. When people say they lack motivation, what they really mean is that they are operating from a low-energy emotional pattern. They are trying to build a powerful future while living in a disempowered present. You cannot expect inspired action to come from a state of stress, boredom, or self-doubt. The nervous system is designed to conserve energy when it feels threatened or uncertain. In those moments, your brain prioritizes comfort, safety, and familiarity. This is why people procrastinate, not because they are lazy, but because their emotional state is signaling that action is risky or overwhelming. Consistency is not about forcing yourself to do more. It's about learning how to shift your state before you act. When you change your physiology by moving your body, breathing deeply, or standing with intention, you send a new signal to your brain. When you redirect your focus toward what you can control instead of what you fear, your emotional chemistry changes. And when you give a powerful meaning to what you're doing, linking it to growth, contribution, or identity, your state elevates naturally. The difference between those who follow through and those who give up is not desire, it is state control. High performers do not wait for motivation to appear. They condition themselves to enter resourceful states on demand. They know that emotions drive actions, and actions reinforce emotions in a loop. Once that loop is understood, consistency becomes a skill rather than a struggle. When you master your emotional state, you stop depending on external motivation. You stop blaming circumstances, timing, or mood. You recognize that your ability to act consistently is already within your control, waiting for you to decide how you show up internally before you ever try to change the world outside of you. Most people believe that the surge of excitement they feel at the beginning of a new goal is motivation, but excitement and commitment are not the same thing. Excitement is emotional, temporary, and dependent on novelty. Commitment is intentional, grounded, and sustained by identity and values. When people confuse the two, they set themselves up for disappointment. They expect the emotional high to carry them through difficulty, and when that high fades, they assume something. NG is wrong with them or with the goal itself. Excitement feels powerful because it creates instant energy. It's fueled by imagination and possibility. You picture the result, the recognition, the freedom, and the transformation. In that moment, action feels easy because your mind is focused on the reward, not the cost. But excitement is fragile. It disappears the moment repetition sets in or when progress becomes invisible. The first obstacle, the first delay, or the first moment of self-doubt is often enough to drain it completely. Commitment works differently. Commitment does not rely on feeling good. It relies on decision. It is a standard you set for yourself that remains intact regardless of mood. When you are committed, you do not ask yourself whether you feel like taking action. You ask yourself who you are and what you stand for. Commitment ties behavior to identity. When action becomes part of who you believe you are, consistency stops being negotiable. Most people never make this shift. They operate from emotional enthusiasm instead of personal standards. They say, I'll do it while I'm motivated, instead of, this is what I do, no matter what. The problem is that emotions change daily, sometimes hourly. Life introduces stress, fatigue, and uncertainty. If your actions are tied to excitement, they collapse under pressure. If they are tied to commitment, they become stable even when conditions are not. Another reason excitement fails is because it avoids discomfort. Excitement loves the beginning but resists the middle. The middle is where growth actually happens. It's where repetition, patience, and discipline are required. Commitment understands this and embraces the process. It accepts that progress is often quiet and uncomfortable. It knows that the absence of excitement does not mean the absence of progress. When people quit, they often say they lost motivation. What they really lost was excitement, and they mistook that loss as a signal to stop. They never trained themselves to act without emotional reinforcement. They never built the muscle of follow-through. Over time, this creates a pattern of starting strong and finishing weak, which erodes self-trust and confidence. The moment you stop chasing excitement and start honoring commitment, everything changes. Your actions become consistent. Your confidence grows through evidence, not emotion. You stop needing inspiration to move forward because your standards do the work for you. In that shift, motivation stops being something you wait for and becomes something that is reinforced by every promise you keep to yourself. Every decision you make, whether you realize it or not, is driven by a simple internal force, the desire to avoid pain and the desire to gain pleasure. This is not a weakness in human behavior. It is a survival mechanism. Your nervous system is constantly scanning for what feels safe, familiar, and rewarding, and it pushes you away from what feels uncomfortable, uncertain, or emotionally costly. Understanding this dynamic is essential, because most people believe they quit due to lack of discipline, when in reality they quit because the balance of pain and pleasure has shifted against them. When you first commit to a goal, the pleasure is clear and immediate. You imagine success, approval, freedom, and pride. That imagined pleasure creates momentum. But as soon as action requires effort, sacrifice, or patience, pain enters the picture. Pain shows up as frustration, self-doubt, fear of failure, or even fear of success. If that pain begins to outweigh the pleasure you associate with the goal, your brain starts searching for an exit. Quitting becomes a form of relief, not because it feels good long-term, but because it reduces discomfort in the moment. What most people don't realize is that they are constantly conditioning themselves. Each time you avoid a difficult task, your brain learns that avoidance equals relief. Each time you procrastinate, you reinforce the idea that short-term comfort is more valuable than long-term growth. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. You don't consciously decide to quit. Your nervous system pulls you away from pain before you even question it. At the same time, people often fail to attach enough pain to staying the same. They tell themselves they want more, but they don't fully experience the cost of inaction. The consequences feel distant, abstract, and manageable. As long as staying where you are feels tolerable, there is no urgent reason to change. Real transformation happens when the pain of remaining the same becomes greater than the pain of growth. Without that shift, motivation will always collapse under pressure. Pleasure works the same way. If the rewards you associate with your goal are vague or external, they lose power quickly. External rewards fade, approval fades, novelty fades. But when pleasure is linked to identity, progress, and meaning, it becomes sustainable. The act of showing up becomes rewarding in itself. Growth becomes a source of fulfillment, not just an obligation. Most people lose momentum because they allow pain to dominate their focus and delay pleasure until some distant finish line. High performers reverse this pattern. They associate pain with quitting, with regret, with lost potential. They associate pleasure with effort, learning, and progress. By consciously rewiring these associations, they change behavior at the deepest level. Once you understand that pain and pleasure drive every action, quitting stops being a mystery. It becomes a signal that your internal associations need to change. When you learn to control what your brain links pain and pleasure to, you stop fighting yourself and start directing your energy in a way that makes consistency feel natural, purposeful, and aligned with the future you are committed to creating. Most people try to sustain motivation by relying on moods, external rewards, or temporary inspiration, but these sources are unstable and short-lived. Motivation that lasts is not built on how you feel in the moment. It is built on what something means to you. Meaning is the deepest driver of human behavior. When an action is connected to a purpose larger than convenience or comfort, it activates a level of commitment that emotion alone cannot reach. Without meaning, even the most exciting goals eventually feel empty. When people say they've lost motivation, what they've actually lost is a sense of why it matters. They may still want the outcome, but they are no longer emotionally connected to the reason behind it. Goals that are rooted only in achievement, recognition, or comparison lack durability. Once progress slows or validation disappears, the drive collapses. Meaning, however, creates resilience. It transforms effort into expression and struggle into growth. Meaning comes from linking what you do to who you want to become. When your actions align with your values and identity, consistency becomes natural. You are no longer forcing yourself to act. You are reinforcing the person you believe you are. This is why two people can face the same challenge and respond completely differently. One sees it as a burden. The other sees it as a chance to prove something to themselves. The difference is not strength or talent. It is meaning. Sustainable motivation also comes from contribution. When your goals extend beyond personal gain and connect to impact, service, or responsibility, they gain emotional weight. You are no longer acting only for yourself. You are acting for the people you influence, the example you set, and the future you are shaping. That sense of responsibility creates a powerful internal pressure to follow through, even when enthusiasm fades. Another reason meaning outlasts mood is that meaning does not depend on circumstances. Moods change with sleep, stress, weather, and external events. Meaning remains stable. You may not feel energized every day, but if what you're doing represents growth, integrity, or purpose, you will act anyway. Over time, those actions generate confidence and momentum, reinforcing motivation from the inside out. Many people never take the time to define what their goals truly represent. They chase outcomes without clarifying the deeper reason behind them. As a result, motivation feels fragile and inconsistent. The moment discomfort arises, there is nothing strong enough to hold them in place. But when meaning is clear, discomfort becomes acceptable, sacrifice becomes temporary, the effort becomes worthwhile. The shift from mood-based motivation to meaning-based motivation changes everything. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting to feel ready. You act because it matters, because it aligns with your values, and because it reflects the standard you hold for your life. When meaning becomes the fuel, motivation stops burning out and starts sustaining forward movement with depth, stability, and lasting emotional strength.